Welcome to the 3x5 News, Views, and Reviews. Scribbled on index cards. We get in and we get out fast, so keep up. I attended integrated public schools in the 1950s and 60s, and while my family was conservative, my mother, who grew up poor in the Great Depression, always demonstrated considerable compassion for the disadvantaged. Also, during my teen years, my heroes were black athletes, Jim Brown, the trailblazing Tommy Smith, and black musicians, Jimi Hendrix, Otis Redding, John Coltrane, John Lee Hooker, and, as well, I thrilled to the Black Panthers. In other words, I was pretty much prejudice-free. That soon grew to include people of all ethnicities and sexualities, as well as religions, which was helped by my half-Jewish heritage, thus indisposing me to anti-Semitism. Of course, nobody is entirely free of prejudice. Well, except maybe much of Gen Z. You have to hand it to them. In that regard, Gen Z is often pure as the driven snow, assuming that the snow is not just white, but black and brown. Aside from that generation, most of those who think they are completely devoid of prejudice are in denial. The trick is, when such a thought appears, acknowledge it like the black cloud that it is and just let it drift away. Okay, I admit to often nourishing my prejudice against MAGA. What makes people biased? For starters, obviously their upbringing, their parents, as I alluded to above. In other words, they are born into it. For more, we asked ChatGPT, which informed us that being around family members, friends, and coworkers who hold racist views can make those views seem normal, especially when it's reinforced by politicians, media, and algorithms that present the same toxic material to you day after day, hour after hour. Also, lack of meaningful exposure to people of other ethnicities can hinder one's understanding of how human they are. On the other hand, one or two negative encounters with them can lead those prone to bigotry to extrapolate their behavior to the entire group. Leave us not forget the caste system, in which working class and poor people fortify their shaky self-image not by looking up with anger at those who oppress them, but by looking down on other races whom they believe are inferior. Thinking myself immune to such behavior, I instead recently learned how easily even I, the great enlightened one, could become biased. On a smaller scale, it was more a microcosm of bigotry. It might sound silly, but go with me. I know the spotted lanternfly has been embedded in America for a decade, but it was only a couple of years ago that I became aware of their existence. Suddenly, I was hearing about how they were an invasive species that had to be stamped out, literally stomped on. I never followed that thinking, both because, as a quasi-Buddhist, I keep my killing of insects to a minimum, and, even if I weren't so inclined, I would never step on them, both because it leaves a disgusting mess behind and on the bottom of my shoe. Anyway, I found myself viewing them with fear and hatred, even though on the face of it, they rank with butterflies as among the most beautiful of insects. The lantern and spotted lanternfly reflects how the colors and patterns of their wings evoke Chinese paper lanterns. They are like a touch of old China in the West. My loathing for them was a reflection of the loathing apparent in the voices of those who told me about them. I admit that I hadn't even looked up on why they were considered such a threat. Spotted lanternflies have been especially prevalent this year where we live, and I find myself viewing them almost as if they were cockroaches. A huge discordant note to the harmony of my outdoors experience. I finally researched and learned how much of a threat they actually are. They feed on trees, weakening them, and crops, damaging them. They specialize in grape orchards. The cherry on top is that, according to ChatGPT, they feed on sap, which sweetens their excrement, colorfully called honeydew, which in turn can produce mold. Triple yick. All things considered, an unsavory species, in contrast to those humans many of us view in such a light. In the end, I was soundly chastened by how easily I was led to condemn the spotted lantern fly by those around me. In other words, no better than anyone else. I was led by the nose to bigotry. Think you're completely open-minded? I thought I was too.